A pair of what look like long, spindly legs glide across a California lawn with no torso. A pale, human-shaped creature crawls through a Kentucky backyard in the dead of night, and a massive, fur-covered figure gets caught on camera in the Colorado wilderness. These are real mythical creatures caught on camera. So this guy caught something really spooky on camera while motorbiking. TikToker Moat Owens was riding through a forest trail as the sun was setting. He was pretty deep into the trail, which he said seemed to go on forever. And he comes to a fork in the path. Then he notices something strange. It's eerily quiet.
Holy crap, dude, this trail going on forever.
He sits there for a few moments, trying to decide which path to take, before he spots something poking out of the brush. Take a look at this. As soon as he sees the thing, he rightly zips back in the direction he came from, but not before struggling to get his bike started like he's stuck in a monster movie or one of those awful nightmares where you're being chased only to find that you've lost the ability to run. Pretty awful. A man named Jose in Fresno, California had a security camera outside his home, mainly to keep an eye on people messing with his front lawn. Well, one night his dog started barking like crazy, so he went to check the camera footage, and what he saw completely threw him. It was a thin, pale white figure with long legs gliding across the lawn. It had no arms, no real body, it was just the two long, tube-like legs and something small connecting them at the top. It didn't move like a person or an animal, mainly because it didn't look like a person or an animal. Jose was freaked out and immediately woke up his brother. According to Jose, his brother went outside and found weird little footprints in the dirt. But when investigators finally got there, it had rained and whatever physical evidence was there was now gone. This was the first ever footage of what's been referred to as the Fresno Nightcrawler, or crawlers. Some folks have seen multiple of them at once. In July of 2022, a home security camera in Moorhead, Kentucky picked up something really weird. Something that looked like a pale, almost human-shaped figure moving through someone's backyard late at night. The creature was thin, with long arms and legs, and no visible clothes or fur. It didn't run or walk like a person, it just kind of crept through the yard in this slow, eerie motion. The homeowner released the clip online, and it was shared around everywhere, even news sites. A lot of people said it looked like some kind of a rake. Others say this one has a bit of an alien vibe to it. The video was picked up by local news, including the Tribune, which simply labeled it as a bizarre backyard sighting. Nobody came forward with any clear explanation, and wildlife officials didn't release any statements about what it could have been. Internet theories went all over the place with this one, from a deformed deer walking upright, which is a bit of a stretch, to a sick person wandering around naked. That's much more plausible. Or maybe something straight out of The Descent. This next video went viral in the early days of YouTube. The uploader was filming his kids who were visiting friends. Most of the video is just the kids showing dad around the yard, talking about where they play, talking about all the animals that live in certain spots. Then they reach an apple tree, and one of the kids spots a strange insect. As dad gets closer with the camera, he spots it. At first, it looks like a dragonfly, but it quickly becomes clear it isn't. Now, keep in mind this video was uploaded in 2008, well before your average person could just have an AI spit something like this out, so it's a well done video. I'm not sure exactly where this video comes from originally, but based on the camera quality, it looks to be from the early days of YouTube. Some kids are messing around with a soccer ball, trying to balance it on their feet, and then this happens. I don't know if you caught that, so here it is slowed down a bit. So this small creature makes its way across the floor. It's hard to make out what it is. It could easily be a rat or something, but the title of the video mentions a gnome, and a lot of commenters mentioned it looks like this thing is wearing a small pointy hat. And this next one is pretty similar. Just like the last video, it comes out of Mexico. We see a young girl possibly celebrating her birthday. As she goes to walk into the next room, she sees something and immediately starts to scream. Again, there's this small, gnomish looking creature walking across the floor. You can easily say it was, some kind of rodent if it weren't for the pointy pink hat it was wearing. But I don't know, maybe it's just a rat carrying a party hat. This one happened in Chester, England, a quiet little city near the border with Wales. Lucia Cardaro, a 37-year-old songwriter and mom, was just getting into bed after 11 p.m. when she heard a motorbike revving on the corner outside. And then came a sudden thump on her living room window. She thought someone had thrown something at it. She checked her CCTV footage, and that's when she saw it. This tiny winged figure flitting past the camera. According to Cardero, quote, "When I looked on the camera, I thought, that's a bit odd. If that's a butterfly, it looks a lot like a fairy, but I mean, what are the chances? It's very strange. I was rewinding and rewinding and rewinding, but the more I saw it, the more I was convinced. When I showed my 4-year-old son, he said, 'Wow, do you think it's going to go back to Father Christmas and tell him I'm a good boy?' There was no doubt in his mind." In the early 90s, a young man named Brian Collins claimed to have spotted 2 fairy-like beings. He'd been vacationing on the Aran Islands just off the coast of County Donegal, Ireland, and one morning while he was out for a walk, he came across 2 figures, no taller than 3.5 feet. They were fishing from a bank that overlooked the water. They were chatting and laughing in Irish Gaelic. As soon as the small creatures noticed Brian, though, they dashed off, jumping over the bank and disappearing from sight. Brian tried to follow them, but they were gone. He did find a small pipe one of them had left behind, though, and according to Brian, this pipe vanished from a locked drawer where he'd stashed it away. He was determined to spot the little men again, though, and this time he wanted evidence. He went back to the same spot the following day, armed with a camera and a tape recorder. Again, this was the early 90s. This time he took a photo and recorded their conversation. He raced back home to review what he'd recorded, but there was nothing on the recording other than the sound of water and a light breeze. He later looked at the picture he developed, and there was no sign of the little people there either. In August of 1862 in Brecon, Wales, David Evans and Evan Lewis were heading back from a timber haul when they decided to take a break near a farm. As they sat there relaxing, Evans suddenly spotted something on a hill nearby. It looked like a line of around 50 figures making their way up the slope. Once the figures reached the top of the hill, they started dancing in a large circle. Evans and Lewis just sat there watching as the figures danced closer and closer to the center of the circle, only to disappear into the ground one by one. Then they reappeared the same way, one after another, dancing another round before vanishing back into the hill, and this time they didn't come back out. Evans and Lewis later bumped into an old man on the side of the road, and they got to talking and ended up sharing their story with the man. The old guy wasn't sure what to make of what they told him, but he did mention that his own grandfather had told stories about fairies dancing in the area. In 1884, on the Isle of Man, a man named William Martin was vacationing when he came across a mail car driver who ended up telling him a very unusual story. According to the driver, one evening while collecting mail, he had a run-in with a group of small fairy-like creatures. They'd been dressed in bright red, each carrying a lantern. As the driver was making his way back, just 6 miles from his final stop, these mischievous fairies stopped the cart's horse, tossed all the mailbags onto the road, and then began dancing around them. The driver tried to get the bags back onto the cart, but every time he did, they just kept tossing them back out. This went on all night, and by the time he finally got the bags back on the cart and reached his destination, he was hours late and incredibly frustrated. That's a very bizarre version of the dog ate my homework. This next case was shared by a woman named Mrs. G. Herbert in a 1928 issue of the Transactions of the Devonshire Association. Back in 1897, when she was just a young girl, she had a strange encounter in Dartmoor, England. While out for a walk, she spotted a tiny man, around 18 inches tall, hiding under an overhanging boulder. He wore a pointed hat that curved slightly forward and was wearing what she described as little short knicker things. Before she could fully grasp what she was seeing, the little man vanished. Herbert rushed home to tell her mother, who of course didn't believe her. Then in 1925, a now 35-year-old Mrs. Herbert found herself on the moors of Dartmoor again. She was very familiar with the area now, but she suddenly, for some reason, found herself completely lost. And with no idea of which direction to take, she started to think that she was under the influence of troublesome fairy folk. So she turned her pockets inside out an old charm said to help ward off fairy magic, and apparently this worked because suddenly everything around her was familiar again, and she was able to finally find her way back home. From Reddit user Kuro Oruk comes her first-hand account with fairies. She writes, "When I was about 20, I was staying at my boyfriend's mom's house one night. I was a little sleep deprived as we'd been out the night before. I decided to go upstairs for a nap and woke up some hours later to darkness. The full moon was shining through the window and suddenly there was rustling and movement everywhere in the room. As I tried to see what it was that was moving, I started to see tiny beings coming from all around the curtains and kind of bungeeing down the glass onto the floor. There were voices and they sounded excited. I sat up, terrified, and made a run for it downstairs. I remember being a little embarrassed to say what had happened to freak me out so much, but when I relayed my story to my boyfriend's mom, she just smiled and told me, oh, that's nothing to worry about. Every morning when I get up, I open the back door and I invite the fairies in." One intriguing account of fairy sightings comes from the early 20th century in Ireland. Most of these stories come out of Ireland, unsurprisingly. The story was recounted by an American anthropologist named Walter Evans Wentz. He'd been doing research into Irish fairy lore and ended up speaking to a 73-year-old man named Neil Colton, who claimed that he'd had a real encounter with fairies in 1853 when he was young. According to Neil Colton, he, his brother, and his cousin were gathering blueberries behind their family home when they started to hear music. To their astonishment, they discovered a group of 6 to 8 small people dancing in a circle just a few dozen yards away. Neil described how once he noticed them, a little woman dressed entirely in red rushed toward them. She struck Neil's cousin in the face with what seemed to be a small green plant. The 3 youngsters immediately fled back into the house, but Neil's cousin passed out shortly after they got inside. His father quickly called for Father Ryan, a local priest, who performed a blessing and struck the cousin with a stole, and miraculously she woke back up. A very strange and outlandish story, but prepare yourself, it doesn't get any less strange and outlandish from here on out. This one's fun because it's a fairly recent case, 2005, recent compared to 1853 anyway. In the summer of 2005 in Chicora, Pennsylvania, a man going simply as JF shared a story to the press about a very strange encounter. He and his girlfriend were hanging out with friends at a house surrounded by dense woods. After enjoying the sunset from the back deck, the group continued to relax and chat as the sun continued going down, and suddenly they heard a commotion coming from the potted plants near one of the last small patches of sun. Everyone turned to see what was causing the noise, and out of nowhere, a tiny figure shot up into the air. The creature was about 12 inches tall and had a human-like head with long, pointy ears. As it hovered in mid-air, wings unfurled from the thing's back, but they weren't the type of wings you typically think of when you picture a fairy. They were more like a bat's wings. After a few moments of hovering over the group, the being fluttered away like a butterfly, disappearing into the dark woods. The group was understandably completely awestruck, sitting frozen in silence for a bit before looking at each other and being like, did we just see a fairy? From Reddit user The Pie Wizard comes a story I'm going to call The Cloaked Figure. I was in Tomnahurich Hill Cemetery in Inverness, Scotland in 2018. I heard a woman's voice whisper my name in my left ear while I was alone at the top of the hill. Later, I found out from a local bartender that the hill is known as a fairy fortress. Exactly 1 week later, I was in England and had the only instance of sleep paralysis I've ever had. A shadow figure stepped out of a bright light at the foot of my bed. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like a dementor without the cloak. No facial features, maybe about 5 feet tall. The skin on it had texture, lines and such, and was dark gray and black in color. It sat down next to me and leaned in close to my left ear. I didn't hear anything, but was finally able to move at that point, and it got visibly startled and backed away into the darkness, not the same direction of the light. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I felt uneasy for the remainder of my time in Europe, about a month. As soon as the plane took off, I felt a lot less heavy and haven't experienced anything like it since. In May of 1913 in Farmsville, Texas, Three brothers, Clyde, Sid, and Silby Latham, were out in the fields chopping cotton. As they were working, their two dogs suddenly started going wild, barking uncontrollably, but there was no one there, at least not by the looks of it. The boys went to check out the commotion and were shocked to find what they described as a tiny green man standing just 18 inches tall. The little guy was dressed in what looked like a green rubber suit. Before they could fully process what they were looking at, the dogs attacked the tiny guy and sadly just ripped him to pieces. The brothers would head back to the scene the next day to verify what they'd seen and make sure they hadn't lost their minds, but when they returned, there was no sign of the green man's remains. Decades later, in 1978, Larry Sessions from the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History took an interest in the case and interviewed Silby. He was understandably pretty skeptical of this story, but Silby was adamant that everything he said was true and that he and his brothers had not in any way mistaken a large frog for an 18-inch man in a green suit. What the f am I talking about? It's like, wow. In 1948, a young boy named E.G.M. Reynolds from London was on summer holidays in Horsham. One night while setting rabbit traps, Reynolds had a bizarre encounter. Under the moonlight, he spotted a small, hairy figure coming out from a blackberry bush. Reynolds described it as a tiny man standing about 18 inches tall, once again, covered in hair with a bare face that had a leathery appearance and unusually long arms. It sounds like a monkey to me, but when Reynolds shared his experience with the people he was staying with, they just laughed him off. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, Reynolds saw the same hairy man again, this time in broad daylight and in a completely different spot. The little guy was just casually strolling across a lawn, and Reynolds decided he was just gonna keep quiet about this whole thing, this whole second sighting, until coming out with his story to the public when he was older.
This next one is for all of my Game of Thrones fans out there who I'm pretty sure, like me, will be very happy to learn that no, not dragons, guys, I'm a researcher, not a miracle worker, but like I said, dire wolves actually do exist. Well, did exist. Like I said, I'm no miracle worker. Epicyon haydeni, as they are scientifically referred to, went extinct around 5 million years ago, so we just missed them. But our human ancestors might have lived amongst them, as our earliest record of human life does date back to sometime between 5 and 7 million years ago. The massive canid would have stood 35 inches, about 3 feet tall at the shoulder, and had a length of just 1.2 inches shy of 8 feet long. The largest canine alive today, and therefore the closest depiction we have to the dire wolf, is the gray wolf, which comes in at an honestly just slightly less impressive shoulder height of 30 inches and body length of 6 feet. Next up is the kraken. Like mermaids, I guarantee you've heard of this one before, but if not, here it goes. A gigantic, legendary sea monster and another yet major enemy of our seafaring sailor friends, the kraken has been known to sink ships in minutes with its gigantic squid-like tentacles and beak. Well, not so much squid-like as squid exactly. Thought to be nothing more than a myth up until 1856, when the discovery of the giant squid took place in 1856, when a Danish zoologist uncovered records of Danish men having caught the creature all the way back in 1550. The largest giant squid, also known as the chief squid, discovered to date is an insane 13 meters long, that's almost 43 feet, and weighs 495 kilograms, which is 1,091 pounds. So while the animal probably wouldn't have been able to sink gigantic fleets of Voyager ships as the legends tell, I'm guessing it wouldn't have much trouble taking down a rowboat or two. Guys, I hate to do this to you because I so wanted it to be true that an inconceivably large shark species was roaming around the deep to one day be discovered by marine scientists and research experts, but the thing is, the megalodon just isn't that big. I mean, it's huge, but also some reports have suggested that it's literally the same size as a whale shark, and actually a bit smaller, as the largest whale shark apparently measured up to 18.5 meters, 60 feet, whereas the megalodon was said to have measured in at just 18 meters, 59 feet. But I get it, you're looking for a giant carnivorous shark, so let me give you this. An even bigger shark, I'm talking about a mega-sized megalodon, possibly measuring in at more than 30 meters or 100 feet, might have existed at some point. You see, before humans began spreading out across the globe, there was something called megafauna, which basically just refers to really large animals, some examples being the dire wolf, mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and woolly rhinoceroses. When humans began to encroach on the lands of these animals, it is predicted that there was not enough resources to support both them and our Homo sapien ancestors. And because they were much larger than us, and therefore most likely had longer gestation periods and required more food and land, as we said hello to the agricultural revolution, we unfortunately waved goodbye to the majority of the world's megafauna on land. And when the fishing industry began to pick up, aquatic megafauna began to die off as well, most likely including the megalodon. But who knows? Again, only 5% of the ocean has been explored to date. Alright guys, before we get into the last one, please let me know the weirdest creature that you've ever seen down below in the comments. Lastly, we have the chimera, a creature often referred to in Greek mythology as an amalgamation of many different animals fused together. And this thing is so cool to look at. The creature was discovered in the 1980s in the Karoo region of South Africa, and it's still around today, but the earliest fossil found so far dates all the way back to around 280 million years ago. But it is said that the species first came to be after diverging from their shark relatives almost 400 million years ago. Due to their ghostly appearance and their close relation to sharks via their prehistoric shark ancestors, this species has been appropriately nicknamed the ghost shark. Straightforward. I like it. The ghost shark can be found in pretty much all oceans except for the Arctic at a depth of about 2,600 to 8,500 feet. They weigh generally between 5.5 to 8.8 pounds and are a cartilage-based animal. They have one gill on either side of their bodies and have an upper jaw fused to their skull. Think about taking a swim with one of these as you fall asleep tonight. Mermaids are probably the most popular mythical creatures to date, with origin stories coming from just about every corner of the globe. And just in case you've been living under an actual boulder, mermaids are humanoid mammal fish that generally come with the top half of a beautiful woman and the bottom half of some kind of mix between dolphins and marlin. Also known as sirens and said to be quite the charmers with a nice set of pipes, as thousands of stories exist about the creatures luring sailors to their watery death with nothing more than their beauty and a song. I guess beauty really is in the eye of the drunken sailor, because it appears as though what was once thought to be a creature of ultimate fantasy is actually just a manatee, or dugong, also referred to as a sea cow. So, myth busted? Well, the thing is, manatees are generally only found in waters of about 3 to 7 feet deep, maximum 10 to 17, which kind of begs the question, are we really sure that a dugong is all the sailors saw out on the rolling deep sea in the dead of night? Well, I'll put it to you this way. To date, only 5% of the ocean has been explored, so we never really know. Next up, we have the Lernaean hydra, a creature that finds its origins based in Greek mythology. The hydra is said to have been birthed by the mother and father of monsters, and to have 3 to 7 heads, toxic breath and blood, as well as regenerative and immortal properties. Hercules was the one to defeat the creature in a daring battle in which he cut off the monsters' heads only to watch in horror as they grew back stronger. Eventually, however, Hercules realized that by cauterizing the point of breakage between neck and head, he no longer had this problem. As Hercules came closer to victory, the mother of the beast, fearful for its demise, sent a giant crab down to the river in which the snake-like creature lived in order to assist it in the battle. But success was not given to the monsters that day, as they both perished in the fight. A 3-headed corn snake, appropriately named none other than Hydra, is our modern-day version of the giant reptilian creature. The 3 heads are due to a phenomenon referred to as polycephaly that creates mutations within the animals. What do you think? So, you know the giant crab I mentioned like just a minute ago? Well, yeah, that's actually real too. Surprise! This mythical creature comes to us in the form of a Japanese spider crab. These monsters that come from the deep sea are massive, with a possible leg span of up to 13 feet across and a diet that consists of dead or decaying fish. so basically corpses. Not only that, but the creatures are said to be immortal, as they are thought to live for over 100 years and also have the ability to regenerate their limbs. Another fun fact, when the giant crab reaches adulthood, its center body stops growing, but just like human ears and noses, its legs will continue to grow throughout its lifespan. Oh, and females of the species can also lay up to 1.5 million eggs within a single birthing season. So, yeah, super cool. Next on the list, we have the ningen, a staple of mid-2000s Japanese folklore. This aquatic whale-like humanoid is said to roam throughout the icy waters of the Antarctic region. The creature was reportedly first sighted by both Japanese fishing and research vessels, claiming to have seen the human-like figures within the waters beneath their boats. The ningen, which means human in Japanese, is said to be somewhere between 60 and 90 feet long, meaning it's ginormous, and many people believe the animal's existence is being covered up by the government because of the fact that the original video said to have captured the ningen has since been wiped from all corners of the internet. However, it appears that 3 photographs do still remain available for our viewing pleasure. One, taken from a remote-operated camera that depicts the creature in a greenish glow, another from an aerial view showing off its massive size, and one more captured through ROV, remote-operated vehicle footage, depicting the creature floating eerily in the dark of the deep sea. At our halfway point, we have the jackalope. Believe it or not, the horned rabbit is in fact real, and also way creepier than we thought. The legend of the jackalope found its origins in North American folklore, described as a jackrabbit with the horns of an antelope. While some cultures view the animal as an omen of bad luck, others view it as a sign of good fortune. In reality, it's actually neither. I mean, it's kind of bad luck for the rabbit, as the occurrence of the horns, which look more like random spikes than antelope antlers, is due to a disease called Shope virus, which originally appeared in cottontails, not jackrabbits, and is closely related to the HPV virus. However, the Shope strain is non-transmittable from animals to humans. The disease, which causes hard, dark warts to grow on the face of cottontails, has now also been found within bush rabbits, black-tailed jackrabbits, snowshoe hares, European rabbits, and even domestic ones too.
This is a photograph of a beastly animal that was burnt alive by this group of brave men, the hodag. This story comes out of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, a small town in the north of the state. It all started back in the 1890s when a local timber cruiser named Eugene Shepard came out saying that he'd come across this terrifying creature in the woods. According to his description, it had, quote, the head of a frog, the grinning face of a giant elephant, thick short legs set off by huge claws, the back of a dinosaur, and a long tail with spears at the end. Shepard claimed they had to use dynamite just to kill the beast. He'd even released a photo of the charred remains, calling it the, quote, fiercest, strangest, most frightening monster ever to set razor-sharp claws on the earth. In 1896, Shepard said that he captured another hodag alive with help from a few bear wrestlers and a chloroform-soaked pole. He showed the thing off at the Oneida County Fair and at his own home, where he'd rigged it to move using wires just to scare people for fun. Yeah, the whole thing was a hoax. Shepard was kind of known as the town prankster, and the fun ended when scientists from the Smithsonian said they were coming to investigate. At that point, Shepard finally admitted he'd made the whole thing up. But by then, the hodag had already become a local legend. I just had to include this one. It was just too fun a story. So this farmer in India walked out onto his property to see this massive snake that had just finished swallowing one of his cows. Look at the giant bulge right in the middle of the snake's body. Instead of running away, the farmer actually grabbed a rope and lassoed the snake, just threw it right over the middle of his body like he was wrangling a steer. I don't know what kind of nerves that guy has, but if I were in his boots, I'd have quit farming on the spot. I would be halfway across the country before even thinking about coming back. The clip's been shared around a lot online, and people are still debating what kind of snake this was. Some say it might have been a green anaconda, which do get very big. Others think it was something even bigger though, maybe something not officially documented. Certainly looks like it to me, but thankfully I do not live in a country where there are massive poisonous snakes stalking the forests, so not too familiar. This next clip is one of those what the hell am I looking at moments. It was filmed in Santa Fe, New Mexico sometime last summer, but that's about all we know. I really don't know how to explain what this thing is. Doesn't appear to be fully human, but I mean, maybe it is, I don't know. Now, New Mexico is no stranger to strange sightings. It's got a long history of chupacabra reports, the goat-sucking cryptid that's said to drain livestock. Sightings of these creatures pop up all across the Southwest, into Mexico, and even parts of South America. So naturally, people are wondering if this thing caught on camera could be a chupacabra. Others think it looks like a skinwalker caught mid-transformation. Whatever it is though, I can say for sure that I don't like it, and if I were living out there in Santa Fe and saw something like this slinking around, I'd be rethinking my zip code real fast. But what do you think? Real cryptid, elaborate hoax? Let us know down below. This next clip comes from deep in the Amazon rainforest, and if you're one of those people who roll their eyes at the idea of 50-foot snakes, this might give you second thoughts. Now, at first it looks like just another shot of something slithering through murky water, nothing too out of the ordinary, probably a big anaconda, right? But then the camera zooms out, and you start to realize just how massive this thing really is. Some people say it could be a modern-day Titanoboa, a prehistoric snake that was said to grow over 40 feet long. Supposedly extinct for millions of years, but who really knows with a place like the Amazon? It's one of the most unexplored regions on Earth. If a monster-sized snake was going to survive anywhere without being found, this is definitely the place. Now, sure, this could be a trick of the camera. Maybe the angle makes the snake look bigger than it is, but when you see something that looks like it came straight out of the Jurassic period, moving that smoothly through a real jungle river, it's hard not to wonder what else might be out there. Sometimes it feels like we've just barely scratched the surface. How would you like to see this thing creeping through your backyard? In this video shared by TikTok user Cryptid, a weird pale creature is caught crawling through someone's backyard in the middle of the night. It's moving on all fours and it looks way too thin to be a normal person. Its limbs are long and kind of jerky, and there's something really off about how it moves. A lot of people instantly compared it to the Rake, the creepy internet legend that's been floating around since the early 2000s, and this thing definitely has a similar vibe. The creature in the video doesn't really do much, just crawling along, but man, does it give me the creeps. Looks like it shouldn't exist. Too thin and lanky to be a person, but unlike any animal I've ever seen. Back in 2012, a trail cam on Whiteman Hill in Wetzel County, West Virginia picked up something very strange. A woman named Kelly Morgan submitted photos from her brother's deer camera that seemed to show a pale ghost-like figure wandering through the woods at night. According to Morgan, there's an old local legend about a young bride who was killed on her wedding day and that her spirit is said to roam the woods. She said her aunt told her the story, but it's mostly passed around as hearsay. Still, digging into the area's ghost tales, Morgan found a disturbing version of the story. Around 1882, 3 men allegedly took a young girl to a remote spot near Whiteman Hill, and after tormenting her, they hanged her. There is a small cemetery nearby that some think might be connected as well. The idea of a ghost bride fits into a much bigger pattern in folklore. Susan Dahl, co-author of Haunted Tales from the Holler, hadn't heard this exact story, but she did note how common ghost bride tales are, saying they are so common you could call them a bona fide subcategory. This has become a pretty famous image, right up there with the infamous Nessie photograph. This is supposedly photographic evidence of a creature called Champ that lives in Lake Champlain. There have been over 300 reported sightings of the creature over the years, but in 1977, amateur photographer Sandra Manzi spotted something sticking its head out of the water and snapped the now famous photo. Some describe Champ or Champy as a snake-like creature. Others say it's like an aquatic dinosaur, something like a plesiosaur. Champ has become a full-on local celebrity though. In Port Henry, New York, they built a giant statue of it. There's even a Champ Day festival every year. Businesses in the area, car washes, diners, gift shops, slap Champ on their logos, and Vermont's minor league baseball team is literally called the Lake Monsters, with Champ as the mascot. It's a modern-day mythical creature, and people keep watching the lake, hoping to be the next to spot it.
Number 5. The Stymph alien birds. The Stymph alien birds are a group of insatiable birds in Greek mythology. One of Hercules' labors was to kill the Stymph alien birds. Oh, and did I mention they were also man-eating birds with a particular habit of throwing poop? They sound great. Truly. The Greeks liked to scare people with these killer bird tales, but the Maori tribe of New Zealand told similar legends of the pukai or hoki, I hope I said that right, a giant black and white bird that swooped down from the sky to pick off people. Terrifying as this sounds, they were real birds, except they were called Haast eagle. They are an extinct species of eagle that once lived in the South Island of New Zealand. It was the largest eagle known to have existed, with an estimated weight of 33 pounds. The bird stood over 6 feet tall and had a wingspan of over 8 feet. The Haast eagle would sit atop of trees and then ambush its prey by swooping down at 60 miles per hour speeds. Then it would disembowel its meal with sharp talons. Hercules could never have survived these hell birds, but you could, as they became extinct around the 1400s. Number 4. Vampire deer. Vampire deer. Just the name makes you think that they are deers that suck blood of animals and humans, but fortunately, or unfortunately, that's not what they do. Yes, vampire deer are a real animal, but do they not drink blood? Well, why is it called vampire deer? Well, it has fangs. Yes, fangs. Its other name is water deer. They are native to Korea and China, but have spread after first being imported to Great Britain in the 1870s to France, Argentina, England, and parts of the United States. From a distance, they look a lot like regular deer, but as you get closer, you can see that they have fangs. They have developed long canine teeth which protrude from the upper jaw. The teeth usually erupt in the autumn of the deer's first year at approximately 6 to 7 months of age. By early spring, the recently erupted tusks reach approximately 50% of their final length, and as the tusks develop, the root remains open until the deer is about 18 months to 2 years old. When fully grown, only about 60% of the tusk is visible below the gum. Now, despite listings of vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature in South Korea, the animal is thriving due to the extinction of natural predators such as Korean tigers and leopards. Since 1994, Korean water deer have been designated as harmful wildlife, a term given by the Ministry of Environment to wild creatures that can cause harm to humans or their property. Number 3. Emogi. Emogi are Korean dragons, which resemble all forms of Chinese dragons. They are often depicted as long, snake-like reptiles with 4 legs. Unlike European dragons, emogi do not have wings and are considered benevolent creatures related to water and agriculture. While there's no such creature in fossil record, there is something similar called the Titanoboa. Titanoboa was the largest snake to ever slither across the ground, and various specimens have been found indicating that they could grow up to 42 feet in length and weigh as much as 2,500 pounds. That sounds terrifying. They existed around 60 to 58 million years ago, following the extinction of all non-avian dinosaurs. Though originally thought to be an apex predator, the discovery of skull bones revealed that it was more likely to specialize in preying on fish. I would not want to run into one of these. Number 2. Sea serpent. A sea serpent or a sea dragon is a type of dragon sea monster described in various mythology. It was said to be 200 feet to 400 feet long and 20 feet wide. The sea serpent is another ferocious creature believed to roam around the ocean. This creature, as you may have guessed by its name, is supposedly a monstrous fish-snake hybrid. Stories of this make me never want to go into the ocean again. Now, like the kraken, the sea serpent really exists, even though its features and stories are heavily exaggerated. The sea serpent is actually an oarfish, which really looks like a fish-snake hybrid. An oarfish is a huge, greatly elongated fish. The giant oarfish is the longest bony fish alive, growing up to 36 feet in length. It's found in areas spanning of the temperate ocean zones to tropical ones. Unfortunately, we know a little about the oarfish because it lives deep underwater and it's rarely seen. However, we know it neither feeds on humans nor fishes, but on small marine creatures like crustaceans and krill. It was officially discovered in 1772, centuries after the legend it inspired first appeared. These still sound terrifying to me, so I'm glad they're rarely seen and stay deep in the ocean. And coming in at number 1 is unicorn. The unicorn is a legendary creature that has been described as a horse with a single large pointed spiraling horn projecting from its forehead. They're portrayed as being magical and beautiful and have become a popular figure that children love. Personally, I've always wanted to meet a unicorn. So, are unicorns real? Yes, but they're not what you imagine. They were not horses, but rhinoceroses. That is, if the extinct Siberian unicorn is really the origin of the unicorn myth. Like the unicorn, the Siberian unicorn walked on 4 legs and had a huge horn in the middle of its head. However, unlike the unicorn, the rhino was bigger, stronger, and probably just as mean as all rhinoceroses are. For perspective, it weighed 4 tons. The Siberian unicorn lived in Eurasia until it went extinct around 39,000 years ago. Fortunately for the humans that were around at the time, it was a herbivore that preferred munching down on shrubs. Now, this is not as magical as I would have thought.
Next we have the sea serpent, not something you really want to see on a day out in the water, or maybe you do, as mythologically speaking, serpents were said to be representative of creative life force as well as fertility. Along with that, the fabled shedding of the oceanic reptile skin has been said to represent transformation, rebirth, and immortality. So how does all this talk of omens and myths translate to reality? The titanoboa, a 47-foot long aquatic snake estimated to have lived 58 to 60 million years ago, discovered, fossilized of course, in the early 2000s by the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in a coal mine deep within the rainforests of Colombia. Now, because the titanoboa is now extinct, I'll give you a 2 for 1. Today, scientists believe that the creature many sailors mistakenly mistook for a sea serpent is none other than the oarfish. As I mentioned in my previous video, that thing can grow up to be 36 feet long, making it the largest bony fish alive today. No 47-foot long prehistoric sea snake, but it is pretty close.
Stories of the White River Monster, aka Whitey, date back to 1915 in the small town of Newport in Arkansas. Locals have reported seeing a massive creature in the White River, and the descriptions are pretty wild. Some say it looks like a giant, scaly serpent, dragon-like beast. Others have described it looking more like a giant piranha. Maybe there's more than one creature. The first sighting was on July 1st of 1915. A plantation owner spotted something in the river, describing it as having gray skin and being, quote, as wide as a car and 3 cars long. The next big sighting happened in 1937 when another plantation owner, Brownlet Bateman, reported spotting a creature that had elephant-like skin and was, quote, 4 or 5 feet wide by 12 feet long, with the face of a catfish lolling on the surface of the water. When news of the creature hit, people from all over began flocking to the area, and there were about 100 recorded reports at the time. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of people seeing this creature, especially when the water is calm and clear. Some witnesses have claimed that the monster has a spiked back and a long, writhing tail. There were also reports of it making a loud, bellowing noise. Whitey sightings have become a big part of local folklore there, but the last major sighting was way back in 1971. There have been tons of reports of dinosaurs being spotted in the Amazon basin, and no, I'm not just talking about fossils, I'm talking about living dinosaurs. Stories about these creatures date back to the late 19th century, from parts of Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, and Peru. The term neo-dinosaur refers to a variety of cryptids reported in the Amazon basin that some people think could be surviving dinosaurs or some undiscovered species of reptile. These reports are pretty diverse, but they share a common theme. They're described as massive reptilian creatures that look a lot like prehistoric animals. One of the most frequently mentioned types of neo-dinosaur is a long-necked amphibious animal similar to a sauropod dinosaur, like a brontosaurus. These creatures are often described as having enormous snake-like necks and large, bulky bodies. Another common report is an iguanodon-like creature, which have more upright postures and are smaller but still impressive in size. There are even rarer reports of bipedal reptiles that resemble allosaurs, large predators with strong limbs and big teeth. One early account came from Bolivia in 1883. According to a report published in Scientific American, a large, bizarre creature was supposedly killed on the Rio Beni. It was described as being about 12 meters long with a flattened tail. The creature had a kind of armored skin and short legs ending in claws. This story included detailed descriptions and even claims of preserved remains, but the evidence never turned up, so this very well could have been a hoax. But in 1921, there was a report from Colombia's Magdalena River, an iguanodon-like dinosaur was supposedly seen by locals. Swedish naturalist Ralph Blomberg shared a story about a Brazilian Indian named Alvaro Mesquita who encountered a camptosaur-like animal by a swampy lake. Mesquita missed a shot at the creature, which was green, bipedal, and had reportedly red eyes. It fled into the lake and disappeared. There's also a story from 1907. German explorer Franz Hermann Schmidt and his team reported seeing huge dinosaur-like tracks in Peru. They claimed to have spotted a massive, long-necked creature by a lake, describing it as having a tapir-like head, a snake-like neck, and a huge, thick body. They fired at it, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The creature eventually plunged into the lake and disappeared. Now, these are just a few of a long list of reported sightings, and these reports have sparked a lot of theories. Some believe these were just larger than average reptiles. Others think these stories were just hoaxes or exaggerations. But there's also a theory that at least some of these neo-dinosaur sightings could actually be surviving ancient relatives of prehistoric animals. Speaking of dinosaurs, there's also a story about one having roamed the Kasai Valley of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The story goes that in 1932, a Swedish hunter named John Johnson had set out to hunt elephants. Johnson and his servant were scouting through the swampy terrain when they spotted 2 elephants. But there was something odd. There were no other animals around. Where was the rest of the herd? And the elephants seemed uneasy. Then, suddenly from the underbrush, a massive creature sprang up. It was unlike anything Johnson had ever seen. He took a shot at it, hitting the creature once, and it quickly retreated. The 2 men began making their way back to camp, completely awestruck, but they didn't have much time to process what they'd seen because moments later they witnessed that same creature now attacking a rhinoceros in the nearby swamp they were crossing through, ripping one of the rhino's legs off with a single bite. According to Johnson, the creature was about 43 feet long with reddish skin and black stripes, and it had a long snout filled with sharp teeth. A year later, in 1933, a group of hunters set out to find this Kasai Rex, having read about it in the paper. They believed the thing was a giant crocodile and wanted to hunt and sell its skin. They ventured into the swamp where Johnson had his encounter, and they spotted a reddish tail sink into the water. Thought it was maybe an anaconda until the creature made a sudden aggressive move, sending waves of water at the group before the tail smacked one of the hunters, knocking him off his feet. The hunters started firing at a large mass, but only saw splashes of water as it submerged. Terrified and unable to get a clear shot, they eventually retreated. The Brosno dragon, aka Brosnia, from Russia. It's said to lurk in Lake Brosno. Stories of this lake monster date back to the 13th century, when it attacked an army of soldiers that had stopped to rest at the edge of the lake, rising from the water and devouring the men and their soldiers whole. Today, there are urban legends about the creature overturning boats and people going missing in the lake. A lot of skeptics think the creature might just be a giant beaver or a really big pike. Others think it could be groups of wild boars or elks crossing the lake, which might create strange ripples in the water. Another idea is that hydrogen sulfide bubbles up from the lake bottom, causing the water to bubble and create shapes that almost look like a dragon's head. Fishermen say Lake Brosno has a weird underwater structure with sea fish like herring and smelt living there, so some even think the dragon might just be huge skulls of smelt reflecting weirdly on the water. In July of 1934, in Yingkou City in China, a large creature was reported to have swooped down from the sky, causing damage to several buildings before plummeting into the Langdong Sea. This became known as the Yingkou Falling Dragon Incident. It sounds incredibly far-fetched, but it's an interesting piece of historical news because there were a ton of witnesses, and just the fact that a story like this was covered in the paper is just fascinating. So supposedly, for over 40 days in that July of 34 in Yingkou City, the weather was bizarre with constant rainfall. Then on the night of July 28th, people saw something unbelievable in the sky. Witnesses described seeing a huge creature with 2 horns, sharp claws, and scales, just like how dragons are often painted in ancient Chinese art. And the next day, the Shangjing Times ran a headline that read, "Dragon causes disaster. According to the report, this dragon supposedly fell from the sky and crashed into the Langdong Sea and was so powerful that it overturned 3 fishing boats and damaged some harbor buildings, leading to 9 deaths. After causing all this chaos, the dragon supposedly disappeared into the sea. Now, you could look at this reference to a dragon in more of a metaphorical sense, that they were maybe describing the weather itself having this dragon-like level of ferocity and power, but this wasn't the last time this supposed dragon would be spoken of. Just a month later, on August 12th, the Shangjing Times ran another dragon-related story. But this time, it was a bit different. Instead of a living dragon or the wrath of a great storm, this was about a set of very strange bones. On August 8th, a villager had noticed a terrible smell near the sea. He followed the smell and came across the remains of a large dead sea creature, and these remains are about 10 kilometers from where the supposed dragon from before had reportedly fallen. The body had been in the water so long that it was mostly decomposed and it smelt awful. Authorities quickly brought the bones to a dock for everyone to see. The bones were huge, about 10 meters long with 28 vertebrae. The dragon's head even had horns that were around 1 meter long, and accompanying the story in the paper was this image right here. Once again in China, we have the Kunlun Mountain incident. So in 2006, a strange story started to spread about a tourist who vanished under very mysterious circumstances. The story goes that this tourist was exploring the Kunlun Mountains when they ventured off the beaten path and disappeared. After a search, the local authorities found some unsettling evidence. They discovered large, unusual tracks and a strange, disturbing smell in the area where the person went missing. Some locals started suggesting that a dragon might have been involved. The Kunlun Mountains are very important to the cultural history of China, often referred to as the Mountain of 10,000 Ancestors, the forefather of mountains, and in ancient times, the ancestor of dragon veins. There are tons of myths and legends surrounding these mountains, which make up one of the longest mountain chains in all of Asia. So with all the stories surrounding the Kunlun Mountains, it makes sense that sensational rumors would spread when people go missing or are found dead in the area. But is there any truth to this dragon thing? Is information about the presence of a real dragon being kept secret and fear that it would negatively affect tourism? Probably not, but that's not to say strange things haven't happened in this desolate mountain range. The Iowa Dragons. When I first read that, I thought it was some local sports team, but no, apparently Iowa may not be safe from actual mythological dragons, or at least some sort of creature that looks a lot like one. Over the years, locals across Iowa have shared some bizarre encounters with strange winged creatures. The earliest report goes back to 1887. The Bedford Times Independent covered a story about a man named Lee Corder who saw a flying serpent in his cornfield. Corder described it as writhing and twisting with protruding eyes and a forked tongue. He also said that great scales which glistened in the sunlight covered its huge body, which appeared to be flat and nearly a foot in width. According to him, the creature flew and landed with a loud thud before taking off again. Then in October of 1890, in Independence, Iowa, several people reported seeing a creature with wings, a monstrous head with horns, and a mouth like an alligator's. In more recent years, in 2005, a witness simply going by Megan to the press reported seeing a dragon-like creature while driving through Burlington at night. She described it as a 10-foot-long snake-like creature with bat-like wings and a head similar to a seahorse. An Iowa resident going by the name Zeus commented online saying, "I live in Iowa too, in Grand Mound. We see dragons like that all the time. They normally come in the harvest time when the moon is really big and red. They often take cows from my neighbor's pasture. I myself have spotted these dragons 6 different times, one in a group of 3. In October of 2023, 2 passengers were riding the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad, a scenic train that runs through the Colorado wilderness, when one of them spotted something strange walking along a hillside. They pulled out their phone and started recording. What they caught was this figure walking upright across the slope. It wasn't a person in hiking gear. It was tall, bulky, covered in what looked like brown fur, turning at one point to look back toward the train. Some commenters pointed out that the remote location made this very unlikely that anyone would be out there pulling a prank. Others just said, well, it kind of just does look like a costume, but the video made national news and reopened the Bigfoot debate once again. A lot of folks also pointed out how well this thing moved on such steep terrain. For believers, this is one of the better modern Bigfoot sightings. Clear daylight, open view, but like always, what do you all think? In 2019, near Sioux Lookout in Ontario, Canada, Gino Mikas, an experienced hunter, was with his wife and grandson grouse hunting when they heard this eerie howl coming from deep in the trees. Take a listen to this. Now, thinking it might be a moose, Mikas started recording with his phone, but as the howls continued, and they do go on throughout the entire clip, it growing louder and more aggressive, it was very clear that this wasn't anything he'd heard before. Now, keep this in mind, guys. He's been hunting all his life, and he said the sound didn't match anything native to the area. Could this be a legit recording of Bigfoot? Two friends were hiking in British Columbia when they captured something they couldn't quite explain. They spotted this figure walking upright across a snowy ridge. It's distant, but the people behind the camera say they had a much clearer view in person, and what they saw didn't make any sense. See, the terrain was tough. Deep snow, steep drop-offs, no obvious trail, but the figure was moving so smoothly and quickly, without snowshoes, without a backpack, and seemingly wearing all one color. Now, anyone who has ever tried to walk through that kind of snow knows that it's nearly impossible without gear. They said the thing was bipedal, fast, and didn't look like a bear. They admitted the most logical explanation might be it was just some lone, seriously hardcore hiker, but what if that wasn't the case? The closest route down the mountain was a 300-meter sheer drop, and they didn't have climbing gear to follow it. So whether it was a Sasquatch, a fearless snow hiker, or something else, it left them unsettled enough to post online, and a number of people have commented about how much distance this thing manages to cover on such harsh terrain in such a short span of time. Known locally as the Lagerflot worm, this creature is Iceland's answer to the Loch Ness Monster. Said to live in the icy depths of Lake Lagerflot, the beast is described as massive, up to 40 feet long, and not sleek like your typical idea of a sea serpent. Instead, it's said to have a series of large, visible humps. Reports of the creature go all the way back to 1345, and sightings have trickled in over the centuries. In 1963, the head of Iceland's National Forest Service claimed that he saw it with his own eyes. In 1998, a teacher and a group of students said they saw it as well. The most interesting incident might have happened in 1983 when a group of workers were laying a telephone cable near the eastern shore of the lake, and during their depth measurements, they detected this massive moving object deep beneath the surface. When they later retrieved the cable, it was snapped, and right at the spot where it had rested on whatever that thing was. Then in 2012, the story blew up again when a 67-year-old farmer recorded this video of something snake-like twisting and swimming in a river which flows directly into the lake. Next up is this clip here, the Harley Hoffman Bigfoot footage. I remember seeing this clip years ago. It was edited into an interview with Hoffman himself, who's a well-known Bigfoot enthusiast. Now, for a while I couldn't find the footage again, but recently it did pop back up. This is actual footage he claims to have shot, and honestly, it is pretty solid. You get a decent look at the creature. It doesn't come across like some dude stumbling around in a Party City gorilla suit. There's what looks like actual muscle definition under the fur, kind of like what you see in the famous Patterson-Gimlin footage. Now, yeah, the camera is a little shaky, but I mean, come on, if you suddenly ran into this thing in the woods, are you really gonna whip out this perfect, smooth, Kubrick-style tracking shot? I doubt it. The shakiness actually makes it feel more real, like something someone would capture in the middle of a, legit what the hell am I looking at moment. Now let's talk about the 1992 Grassman sighting. Grassman is the name Ohio locals have given to this big ape-like creature that's supposedly been spotted all over the state. This particular video was taken in eastern Ohio by a guy named Don Keating, who managed to capture what looked like a large hairy figure walking into the forest. The footage is, of course, super grainy. and he's pretty far away, so no, it's not crystal clear or anything, but there's definitely something moving through the trees. It's not the strongest video evidence out there. It's hard to tell exactly what you're looking at, but this video was passed around a lot back then, and there was a ton of debate surrounding it. That always makes things interesting. Plus, I just have a fondness for old VHS footage like this. It's just got this creepy, it adds something to it, I don't know. Now, what's interesting is that Keating said he was a skeptic before shooting this, but after the encounter, he changed his tune. And finally, we've got the Salt Fork Creature, another supposed clip of the Ohio Grassman. This video was uploaded to the YouTube channel We Do It Outdoors, and even though it's only about 10 minutes long, it is packed with material. So two guys were exploring Salt Fork State Park, also in eastern Ohio, when they started hearing weird noises, and that's when they caught footage of something big and hairy moving around in the trees. They follow this thing for a while and get some pretty cool footage, more than you usually get with videos like this. Now, if this is a costume, it's a pretty good one. The creature looks bulky. It's not like one of those flimsy, off-the-shelf gorilla suits, and what really makes this one stand out is that the footage is clear. There's no camera shaking, or very little. There's no ridiculous filter to make it harder to see what's going on. You even hear some strange vocalizations in the background, which just adds to the whole thing. Whether it's real or not, this one is definitely worth a watch.
Griffin. The griffin is a hybrid mythical creature. According to myth, they have the faces, wings, and front legs of an eagle, and the rear, tail, and hind legs of a lion. Oh, and they flew too. Talking of existence, griffins really existed, but that was before the first humans appeared. They were actually a kind of dinosaur called the Protoceratops that existed around 75 to 71 million years ago. Like the griffin, the Protoceratops walked on 4 legs and had a beak, but did not have wings. At a time when people had little knowledge of dinosaurs and only birds were believed to have beaks, it's no surprise that people claimed it had wings. I mean, whatever had a beak should have a wing, shouldn't it? And to be fair, the creature had long shoulder blades that could easily be mistaken for wings. Protoceratops were up to 6.6 to 8.2 feet long and around 137 to 229 pounds. They were characterized by a proportionately large skull, short and stiff neck, and neck frill. The frill was likely used for display or intraspecific combat, as well as protection of the neck and anchoring of jaw muscles. A horn-like structure was present over the nose, which varied from a single structure into a double. So, not a griffin, just a dinosaur. Number 7. Dire wolves. In games like Dungeons & Dragons or television series such as Game of Thrones, dire wolves have been depicted as gigantic wolves capable of easily taking down a large man. They are often described as vicious, hard to train, and efficient killers. But the myth of the dire wolf doesn't exactly line up with reality. Dire wolves were real animals which went extinct around 9,500 years ago when the last major ice age came to an end. Dire wolves weren't gigantic monsters, but they were big animals. Most specimens that have been studied showed the dire wolf to be about the same size as a modern gray wolf. They weighed around 132 pounds and were capable predators. Their teeth were larger and had a better shearing ability than their modern cousins. They had a strong bite force at the point of canine to all canis species. This made it possible for them to prey on horses, camels, bison, and humans living during the Ice Age. Number 6. Gorilla. Some of you may not have heard of this animal, but let me explain. Sometime between the 5th and 6th centuries BC, an explorer from ancient Carthage called Hanno the Navigator discovered a tribe of hairy and rude people while navigating the coast of West Africa. In his reports, Hanno wrote that the tribe had more males than females, who he referred to as hairy women and called gorillae. Hanno's party chased the tribe, but they all fled. The males were considerably faster and quickly climbed the cliffs, where they threw stones at his team. The females were slower, and his team managed to capture 3. However, they fought back aggressively, forcing Hanno and his men to kill and skin them. He took their skins back to Carthage. The creature became folklore since no Westerner had seen them again until an American missionary called T.S. Savage rediscovered them in 1847. They were not humans, but apes. Or to be more precise, they were apes we now call gorillas. Savage named the new creatures troglodytes, gorilla, in keeping with Hanno's gorillae. To be clear, there is some debate whether Hanno saw gorillos or some other species of apes. Nonetheless, Savage's troglodytes gorilla was later named gorilla, while the animal itself was called gorilla.
In our number 5 spot, we have gods and goddesses. Gods and goddesses have been worshipped and believed in since, well, the dawn of time. No, they are not mythical creatures, but they are mythical and needed to be on this list. Do you ever think about where the heck the stories about gods and goddesses perhaps came from? Did one person make them up and then others expanded on them? Perhaps. But what if none of them were made up? What if the story of Thor was channeled and it is really a story that took place in another parallel universe? It's definitely possible. There have been a few strange sightings of gods and goddesses over the years. There is one sighting of an eye in the clouds that people wondered if it was the eye of God. It's pretty wild to see, and I wonder what you think. Is this a pure coincidence that the clouds look like an eye, or perhaps is that the eye of God watching us, or a god watching us? In our number 4 spot we have dragons. Dragons are mythical creatures that fly, have long tails, and breathe fire. They have long been cherished by the people of China, who on many occasions have said that they feel the spirit of them or have spotted them. There is a video that was once floating around the internet that would make you think that perhaps they are real. This video isn't confirmed to be real though, but if it is, aw, that's the cutest baby dragon ever. The second video, however, is for sure real, and it is honestly a bit frightening to see. Some think that's a dragon, and some think it's a god or Jesus. But honestly, it could very well be an alien too. Personally, I think dragons most likely exist as a whole in another universe, but it's possible that we may have one or two in our universe as well. Who knows? In our number 3 spot we have the Loveland frog. Before this video, I had never heard of this mythical creature. This creature is essentially a giant humanoid that has qualities of a frog. Much to my surprise, there have been some sightings of this creature that definitely make you think, huh, perhaps it is real. Not enough up close and personal sightings though. But perhaps this is another creature that is from another universe. Watch, there is another universe out there where all of these creatures live and no humans exist. Then we would be their mythical creatures. Here is some footage someone found of what looks to be a Loveland frog. It certainly looks like one to me. I would love to know your thoughts. In our number 2 spot we have the Yeti. The Yeti is an ape-like being entity that people have spoken about as a mythical creature from Asia. No scientist has ever been able to get face to face with a Yeti, and so therefore it hasn't been officially classified as real. But just because we haven't gotten up close and personal with something doesn't mean that it is not real. Perhaps the Yeti has been hiding from humans. Perhaps the Yeti doesn't trust humans. Perhaps the Yeti is just from another universe. Well, not too long ago there were sightings of the Yeti, and here is a photo that someone captured of it running away. I feel like that is solid proof of the Yeti existing. Whether it is what we think it is, a creature more like a human but very tall, hairy, and not as evolved, that is the question. Perhaps it is not what we think it is at all. Perhaps it has magical powers and that is how it has stayed disguised all of this time. Or perhaps he goes back into his own dimension from time to time. Who knows? In our number 1 spot we have fairies. If there is one mythical creature that I am personally obsessed with and would be very, very happy if it existed, it would be the fairy. All of my life I have been obsessed with the idea of them. In fact, all of my life people would say to me that I am very fairy-like. Of course they meant that my spirit reminds them of how movies have portrayed fairies, and so that's their understanding of what fairies are. Personally, I think it is very possible that fairies live among us, and most likely in Ireland. Did you know that it was once thought that the people of Atlantis came to Ireland as their continent was sinking, and so therefore some Irish people would be magical like the Atlanteans, and some believe that our idea of fairies are perhaps just these people that are from Atlantis. Very interesting thought. Perhaps they live in another dimension though, and that's why we can't see them. Or maybe they all went to a parallel universe. Honestly, we could wonder about this forever, and it is fun, but I suppose unless we develop a device that allows us to slip into other dimensions, then we will never really know. But it's sure fun to imagine. In our number 10 spot we have Sasquatch. Alright guys, there have been so many Sasquatch sightings over the years that I'm pretty sure he lives in our universe, but who knows, maybe he jumps between other universes. I could believe it. There was a crazy Sasquatch sighting off of a ski slope where at least 20 people stopped skiing to take a look at the giant hairy creature that looks just like every description of Sasquatch. Giant, about 8 to 10 inches, high, hairy, ape-like, living in the woods. Someone got it on film, but it's so far away that you can only make out how big it is, but none of its features. Its features were hidden behind a shadow. The people that saw it first firsthand though swear that it's a Sasquatch. It is believed that Sasquatch is a human ancestor that never evolved the same way the rest of us did, which, I don't know, could be possible, but I think it came here from another universe, personally. Or perhaps another time. Maybe it walked through time somehow. Or if it came from another universe, maybe it came from a place where only Sasquatches exist. If you like this video, don't forget to smash that like button as it will really help us out. In our number 9 spot, we have Nessie. Nessie has got to be real. There has gotta be magic left in this world. There has to be. I refuse to believe otherwise. Do you know how many sightings there have been of Nessie? Okay, fine, me either. But there have been many, like too many to count. There's a whole website dedicated to people sharing their sighting stories. My theory is though, it must live on another plane of existence and come down to ours every so often, or it's from a parallel universe and slips into ours. Or do you think it's possible that we get glimpses into other universes at times? Here is a video though, taken from the air that shows us a brief moment when perhaps Nessie visited our universe. This video is nuts because if you want to argue that the creature swimming is not Nessie, then what is it? A long-necked dinosaur that still exists? Perhaps a swimming giraffe? Like, come on. Nessie is real, y'all. This video is totally showing something. In our number 8 spot, we have the werewolf. Another mythological creature that might actually live in another parallel universe is the werewolf. Why? I don't know, because it feels like it should exist. Also, there have been sightings of it every so often, and it's always alone, so it's possible that it exists in our universe, but something makes me think that if it did, then why haven't we seen more than one? It would have had to reproduce somehow. Unless it can reproduce on its own, then perhaps I might believe it. Fun fact, a lot of species can actually reproduce via an immaculate conception. A turkey is one of them. Mind blown, I didn't know. Anyways, here's a very cool / interesting sighting of a werewolf that took place in Brazil in 2015. What's cool about this footage is that many people actually saw this creature and wrote about it online, and so it does give the picture some validity. He has long pointy ears, strange wolf-like legs, and has a small tail. The shot is blurry as it's night out, but you can still see that whatever it is, it's not human. You know what it reminds me of? Stranger Things. And the Demogorgon came from a parallel universe, so perhaps that's what this is. In our number 7 spot, we have the parking lot demon. Hey, demons are creatures too. I had to include this one on this list because this could be a demon or a ghost, but whatever it is, it's definitely not from our universe, or it's on another plane of existence and glitching into ours. So the story goes that years ago in Serbia, a woman was being chased by something in a parking lot. She was so scared that she went to the police to report it. The police reviewed the camera footage from the parking lot and discovered something insane. Yes, the woman was being chased, but whoever was chasing her was a transparent human. That's right, see-through. This was such a shock to the police that the story made it onto their local news. The footage is so wild to see that personally I think it makes you an instant believer after viewing it. Believer in something. Not necessarily demons or ghosts, but a believer that there is something magical out there that we don't know about yet. In our number 6 spot, we have mermaids. A mermaid is a mythological creature that is half human, half fish that is said to live in the sea. Under the sea. For centuries, people have believed in mermaids. Fishermen have recalled tales of seeing a fish that looked human, and of course they say that every story comes from some truth. Whether the story of the Little Mermaid actually came from a real sighting of a mermaid is up for debate. Some believe that mermaids exist but perhaps look different than what we would imagine them to be. There have been videos that fishermen have posted online of fish that could pass as mermaids, such as in this clip. This fish has 4 breasts, a big tummy, arms like a human, but has a shark-like head and mermaid-like fin for legs. So perhaps this could be a mermaid, it just doesn't have the long red hair and look as glamorous as Ariel. Regardless, the sea is a whole other universe that we haven't explored much of, so I bet you mermaids do exist.
These images have been floating around online forever. They show what looks like a tiny fairy corpse laid out on a forensics table, complete with wings, teeth, skin, and hair. It's most amazing top 10. You know we had to add like a dead one on this list. It can't all be whimsical. Anyway, supposedly it is a mummified fairy, When the image first hit the web in 2007, people lost their minds. It all started with a dramatic press release titled, "Do Fairies Live at the Bottom of Your Garden?" According to the story, an anonymous man was walking his dog along an old road in the Derbyshire countryside in England. His dog started barking and refusing to go near an Iron Age burial mound. The man said, quote, "He was barking in the direction of the barrow and would not go anywhere near it, which was strange as we walked past it almost every day." So curious, he approached the mound and noticed this fresh crack in the ground. When he leaned in and shined a small LED torch inside, he claimed he saw something. "I could see a human-like form, only this was much smaller," he said. His first thought was that, well, it might be a child's body, until he realized it was too small, and more importantly, it had what appeared to be wings. He carefully pulled it out using a stick and placed it in a dog waste bag. And then he called for his wife. When she arrived, she later recalled seeing a, quote, "tiny but perfect mummified human body with hair, dark brown skin, and most disturbingly, wings." Even stranger, they claimed there were more bodies still inside the mound, possibly over 20. The remains were said to have been examined, photographed, x-rayed, and investigated. People were going nuts online, of course. They were skeptical, sure, but even just the slim possibility that these were the remains of an actual creature, it had people pretty excited. But 1 week later, the creator came clean. In a follow-up statement, he said, "Alas, the fairy is fake. As well as an artist I am, also a magician, and you have been my fantastic audience." But for this brief little window, people believed, and that's kind of fun. And we're gonna have to talk about the most famous fairy caught on camera story in history, the Cottingley fairies. So way back in 1917, in a quiet village in England called Cottingley, two cousins, Elsie Wright, who was 16, and Frances Griffiths, who was just 9, would disappear for hours playing by a little stream behind Elsie's house. Whenever they came back all muddy, they'd say the same thing every time. They were out watching fairies. Eventually, the adults got tired of hearing it, so one day the girls grabbed Elsie's dad's camera and went back to the stream. When the photos were developed, everyone's jaw dropped. The first pictures showed Frances sitting by the water, surrounded by tiny, dancing, winged figures. A second photo showed Elsie posing with a small, gnome-looking creature stood nearby. Elsie's father immediately called it nonsense. He assumed the girls had pulled some kind of prank, but Elsie's mother believed them. The pictures eventually landed in the hands of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes. Instead of debunking them, he went all in. In 1920, Doyle published the photos in the Strand magazine, presenting them as real evidence that fairies existed. This caused a huge split. Some people were fascinated and fully believed it. Others were just furious that anyone could take it seriously. But photographic experts at the time were saying that the images had not been tampered with. The truth didn't come out until the early 80s. More than 60 years later, both women finally admitted that the photos were faked. The fairies were cardboard cutouts copied from a popular children's book, carefully placed in the scene. They held them upright with hat pins. For a while though, even with skeptics, I'm sure there was always this tiny bit of, maybe not doubt, but hope that these images were real. It captured people's imagination for decades. This first piece of footage was just captured back in August, and take a look at this thing. Gotta say, whatever this tiny creature is, it does really look kind of fairy-like. It comes from a home security camera in British Columbia, Canada, owned by a man named Steve McBeath. He wasn't hunting for mythical creatures, of course. His cameras are there to catch burglars or raccoons, but one night the camera captured something unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Outside of storybooks, that is. The camera is pretty straightforward. Whenever it detects motion, Steve gets a notification on his phone, and it will tell him if it's an animal or a person. Most of the time, it's nothing all that interesting. All sorts of critters are constantly moving past it, he said, explaining he'd seen cats, dogs, raccoons, and deer go by on a regular basis. There had been a few serious moments though. Steve says the camera once caught someone trying to open his car and pull on the handle of his back door. So when his phone buzzed one night with a familiar alert, his stomach dropped. It said it saw a person, Steve said, but it was not a person. When he pulled up the footage, he saw this bright glowing shape cross the frame, and suddenly turn upward and fly straight toward the camera. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was bizarre. It looked kinda humanoid, he said. Steve described it as being very eerily lit, with a shimmering silver color. Watching it back, it's easy to see why people immediately started calling it a fairy. Steve eventually chalked it up to something mundane, probably an insect, but he posted the clip online thinking people would get a kick out of it, and well, here we are, so he was right. A lot of people said it reminded them of Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, but the most heartwarming part of this story is the joy Steve took in showing his grandchildren the clip for the first time. And he went on to say, just look for things that are unusual. You never know where something like this is going to pop up and be a bit of fun. And this is a fun video too. It comes from a man named Erwin Saunders in Britain. Saunders actively goes out into nature looking for fairies and elves, and he carries a camera with him every time. In the video, Erwin heads deep into the forest and just films. For the first few minutes, it's pretty quiet, but then he spots something. He points the camera toward a rocky area ahead of him and keeps filming. A little later, he says there's something watching him from above the rocks, and carefully adjusts the camera again. Watch carefully and you'll see this little head poking out. But after a few moments, we see this. A small creature pops out from behind the rocks. It's only out for a few seconds, but we see it long enough to know it's not a normal animal, but it peeks the way an animal does when it's curious but shy. It's adorable. I just can't say how badly I want this to be real. This next video comes out of Puerto Rico, captured on a hotel security camera. Take a look at this. That was kinda nuts. Definitely not a gust of wind. Something very clearly tugged at her hair. We just can't see what it was. Now, this hotel was built over one that had burnt down in 1986, and it's become kinda infamous for its paranormal activity. Guests and staff will say they hear disembodied voices and footsteps or see weird shadows moving about, the usual ghostly flair. But this isn't just spooky, it's rude and incredibly annoying. Whoever this ghost is, they deserved to die in that fire if that's how they go around behaving. This next photo comes from Reddit user Dan_Kukes, who writes, my brothers and I went hammock backpacking in Pennsylvania last weekend. I was going through photos from the trip and started editing this one for an Instagram post. It wasn't long until I realized there was this incredibly human-like apparition / figure behind the campfire smoke just watching us. We never saw anything the whole day and night we were there, and we were 5 miles or so deep in the woods with no one around. It was a mile or so away from a small overgrown trail, so we were confident we'd be left alone. We don't know what to think of this and are pretty shook up over it. This eerie image was posted online by Reddit user Druzy. Looking closely, you can see a pale face with its mouth wide open, peering out the bottom of the window. Now, on its own, the image isn't all that amazing, but if the story attached to it is to be believed, it definitely makes for a creepy post. Druzy wrote, I took this picture sometime in 2013. We'd always experienced things in this apartment. Footsteps, doors closing, lights on and off, blinds always falling off the window, but we never actually saw anything. I was on my way to work one day when I noticed the blinds in my room pressed against the window as if someone was spreading them apart. I snapped a picture to show my mom later, like, hey, look, the blinds were weird, like someone was pressing against them. Never been able to explain the face in the window though. There was nobody home except for my dog.